My name is Merlyn. I am 78. I live on the outskirts of our town, in a house that I once built myself, brick by brick. It was a house of strength, now it has become a prison of silence. The cracks in the walls are not the worst thing here. Worse are the cracks in my children's hearts, in their attitude towards me. Cold, empty cracks of indifference. My son Dmitry is a successful lawyer. He lives in the center, drives a car that probably costs more than this house. My daughter Alina is a department head in some international company. They are smart, purposeful, but when they look at me, it is not the look of a son or daughter. It is the look with which they look at a broken clock that once worked, but now only collects dust. They come once a month. They sit in the living room, as if in a museum of old things. They smile, talk about work, about the new fitness club. Then they glance at their watch, and hurry up. Dad, hang on, we'll call you. But there will be no call. Their duty is done, they were there, now their conscience is clear. Grandchildren. This is a separate wound. I remember dreaming that I would tell them stories about my youth, about the battles I won, about the path I took. And instead, they are silent, staring at the screens. When I ask how they are, they answer briefly, through force. Once my grandson Oleg simply said, "Grandpa, don't bother me." These were bullet-like words. I didn't show how much it hurt me. But I remember. I remember everything. They don't notice me in the store. The young cashier looks through me, as if through me. In the pharmacy queue, when I asked for help reading the small print on the package, the girl behind me burst out laughing. The doctor listens to me through force. It's age, Grandpa, it's normal, the therapist says, without looking me in the eye. And I'm not crying from joint pain, I'm crying from pain in my soul. I wake up at 5. Silence. It used to be an hour of decisions, when I planned work meetings, opened new projects, wrote business plans. Now I plan to be silent. Because no one cares what I say. I don't say toasts, because they haven't called me for a long time. I don't give advice, because now it's moralizing. I have a lot of words, but there are stones in my mouth. I started writing. Not a diary, no, it's different. I call it a list of the missing. There are the names of those who disappeared. Not physically, morally. Who betrayed their memory, who was swallowed by selfishness. Children. Grandchildren. Former friends. Colleagues. All those who once basked in my light, but now consider me a shadow. Every night I sit in a chair by the window. It seems as if the world outside the window is alive. But I am not a part of it. I am superfluous. And there, in this silence, something begins to change. Like an old, creaky beam that has held up for a long time, but can no longer bear the weight. It is not anger yet, no. It is something deeper. A rotten silence that begins to sprout from within. I was not perfect. But I was. I fought. I gave. I created. I held on. And now, they keep me useless. This is no longer just loneliness. This is a betrayal of memory. A betrayal of my path. And I don't know what is worse, that they have forgotten me. Or that I am beginning to say goodbye to my own humanity. They say that memories are a gift. For me, they are a trap. Sometimes I bury myself in them, as if in a grave that I dug during my lifetime. Because in those memories, I am different. I am real. Not this old shell, not a shadow. There is Merlyn, who was feared, respected, and listened to. I started from nothing. After the army, I had nothing. I was 23, with 118 hryvnias in my pocket and a passport with tattered edges. My father died when I was 17. My mother was a silent, hunched woman who didn't know how to say I'm proud. I was used to achieving things on my own. My whole life has been a struggle. I loaded bags at the port. Dozens of hours, with my hands, shoulders, teeth. I lifted weights that others were afraid to touch. But I wasn't afraid of pain. I was afraid of becoming nobody. Then there was the night guard of the warehouse. An ideal job for someone who can think in the dark. I studied economics, law, psychology. Alone. Without teachers, without advice. Each book is like a battle, a step forward. My first business was a small furniture warehouse. 7 squares and the smell of formaldehyde. I washed the floor myself, made deals myself. I was hungry, but dressed decently. People saw faith in me. And it worked. Later, I opened another shop. Then a network. Then a construction company. They knew me. They feared me. I never humiliated the weak, but I never forgave betrayal. Children? They were born in abundance. Dmitri, my son, had everything that I was not given. The best education, protection, support. I bought him his first computer when no one in the city had yet heard of the internet. I taught him that a man's word is more important than a signature. My daughter is gentle, intelligent, and dreamy. I was building a world for her where she didn't know what hunger or fear was. I could buy them a future. But, as it turned out, not gratitude. And then there was Lydia, my wife. She left quietly, like a shadow, a few years before I began to wither. Cancer. Doesn't ask permission. She was my mirror, my balance. And as soon as she was gone, everything slowly began to fall apart. I didn't notice how I was getting old myself. It doesn't come overnight. First, grey hair. Then, a forgotten item in my pocket. Then, silence. Today, I look at who I was and I want to scream. No, not out of self-pity. But out of injustice. I didn't build for myself. I lived for others. And now, I'm gone. Nobody needs me. I'm a reminder. Like an old photograph that they turn face down because they don't want to remember. Everything I once knew, everything I was strong at, has become useless. I can no longer give anyone advice, I can't be a support. And the worst thing is that they don't ask me. People walk past me. Children live as if I'm gone. They are afraid of my gaze, because they know that I see more than they want to show. But I'm still the same Merlyn. It's just that there is more silence in me than words. More stillness than movement. And this stillness is not emptiness. It is accumulation. An accumulation of images, observations, memories. I have memorized everything. All their busy. All their later. All their missing birthdays. All their cold looks. And one day, these memories will become something more. They have forgotten who I am. But I haven't. There is pain that you get used to, like a draft in a room, it is constant, but you no longer flinch. But there is another, the one that comes suddenly, tears like teeth, and leaves behind not a bruise, but a hole. These are the pieces of pain that life has thrown at me in recent years. And each of them became a nail in the silence that settled inside me. My son Dimitro lives 2 steps away by car. But when I once asked him to help rearrange a wardrobe because his back is no longer the same, he looked coldly and said, "Dad, I'm busy." There are services that do that. Services. I stood with the phone in my hand and thought, what if he was 5? Would I also tell him to call someone? The silence after this conversation gnawed at me at night. And then, my daughter. She once said that I was her hero. And now, when I asked to take me to a private cardiologist for a checkup, because it's faster there, she replied, "Dad, why all the expenses? You have enough pension." Pension. I built houses, gave them an education, and now I count pennies to buy medicine and bread. And not because of poverty, but because of indifference. Indifference is always more expensive than poverty. Granddaughter, Sophia. She came last summer. She sat on the sofa, pulled out her phone, and didn't even say hello. I brought her compote, homemade, raspberry. She didn't look. I don't drink that. I'm on a diet. Then she found a notebook in the closet where I made notes, and, smiling, showed it to my brother. Look, grandfather writes down who offended him. Maybe he'll make a film. They laughed. I was silent. But that notebook lay on the table and never disappeared from there again. Because every page is not a fantasy, but a memory. The hospital became another front. I sat in line to see a cardiologist for 3 hours. I stood because there was no room. A young man in a white coat walked by and said, "Sit somewhere, don't stand, you'll fall, fill out the papers later." It wasn't sympathy. It was irritation disguised as concern. When I entered the office, he didn't even take off his headphones. He looked at the monitor, not at me, and said, "It's all age-related. Take your pills. Next." I looked at him and thought, "You're not even human yet. And you've already become a judge." But the worst thing is that over time, the pain becomes ordinary. I noticed how I stopped waiting for calls. How I no longer put a plate on the table for guests. How I don't look out the window when someone else's car pulls up because I already know it's not mine. People walk past me in the supermarket, and no one sees that I once fed their families, paid their taxes, built their roads. Now I'm just an extra body blocking the way. One day I went into a local store to buy groceries. In my hands were 2 bags, some vegetables, some cereals. The cashier didn't even say good afternoon. And as I slowly counted the money, because my fingers were shaking, the man behind me muttered loudly, "Can you hurry up? Normal people are standing here too." I looked up. He wasn't looking at me, but through me. Like a shadow. Like garbage. At that moment, something inside me cracked quietly but sharply. I didn't answer. But I remembered his face. And then there was a day when I fell at home. I just tripped. I hit my shoulder on the table, spilled tea. I sat on the floor for 20 minutes because I couldn't get up. I called my daughter. She didn't answer. Then she wrote, "At a meeting. Write if there's anything urgent." I wrote, "No need." It wasn't about the fall. It was about me. That I'm no longer urgent. Not for anyone. I started keeping records systematically. The pages of my notebook are not complaints, not whining. They're an archive. Facts. Date, place, face, words. Whose voice trembles when they lie? Who doesn't look you in the eye? Who laughs behind your back? I've always been hidden in the shadows. But I see better in the dark than those who live in the light. I often have dreams. In them, I'm young again, strong, sitting in my office and dozens of people call me, asking for solutions, for help. I wake up, and before my eyes is the sky outside the window and dust on the closet. And then I understand, the world has not simply forgotten me. The world has begun to erase me. But even when they erase a name, hands remember. Thoughts remember. And insults remember too. I don't scream. But my silence is heavier than screaming. And it is becoming thicker and thicker. I didn't know then that every humiliation is not the end, but preparation. Every not now is a brick for what will come later. I haven't spoken out loud yet. But I began to listen to myself. And something was arising in me that had been sleeping for a long time. Dark. Prudent. Cold. The silence of my house was no longer the silence of resignation. It was becoming the silence of expectation. That day began, like all the others, with the morning silence, which had not been heard for a long time, but was breathing in the back of my head. I woke up before dawn. The room was cold, although the batteries were barely warm. I used to hate the cold in the house. And now? Now I simply didn't see the point in changing anything. Yesterday's mug of tea stood on the table, already cloudy. I hadn't poured it out. Why? Who in this house cleans anything for me, except for me? I needed to buy groceries, some coffee, cereal, bread, a few apples. A trifle, But I don't like to ask. I never did. However, now it's no longer a matter of pride, but of survival. In my pocket is a crumpled bill, some coins, and a list that I definitely remembered by heart, but wrote down anyway, not for myself, but to keep my hands busy. I walked slowly, carefully to the center of town. I used to be able to drive around 3 businesses in an hour, but now I was careful with every step. The air was grey, the sky heavy. Cars honked at intersections, young people with coffee laughed at bus stops, couriers rushed past like ants. No one looked at me. And it didn't seem strange anymore. Near the store I tripped on the curb. The packages I was carrying in a folded bag slipped out of my hand and opened. I fell to my knee, leaning my hand on the sidewalk. The bag flew onto the asphalt, the apples rolled out, the pack of buckwheat cracked and crumbled. I heard a crunch in my shoulder, but I didn't even cry out. 2 guys were walking nearby. One of them, wearing white headphones, with a phone in his hand, didn't even slow down. The other, in a black jacket, tripped over an apple and looked back. He looked at me and laughed. Frankly. Rudely. For no reason other than contempt. He said something like, "So, Grandpa, did you climb in the wrong place?" There were 2 of them. But to me, there were no people there, only sounds. I said quietly, "Pick that up, please." I didn't even point a finger, I just looked at the apple. The answer was short as spit, "Pick it up yourself. You have legs, right? And don't pretend that you owe me anything here." I saw a woman passing by stop for a second, look back, and walk on without even bending down. Another man walking behind said, "Oh, don't fall here, or you'll get caught." I don't remember how long I stood on one knee. I only remember the sound, laughter. Not loud, but drawn out, sticky. It rang in my ears as if someone was drawing a nail on glass. And I also smelled asphalt. And blood. I think I scratched my hand. A drop fell to the ground, and for some reason I was looking at it. It fell slowly. And inside me, something seemed to wake up. I got up. Slowly. But not in the usual way. It wasn't my hand on the curb that helped me, but some cold strength that I hadn't felt in a long time. I picked up the apples, even the ones that cracked. I mixed the scattered grains with the dust. I didn't start picking them up. Those 2 had already disappeared into their noisy world, where old age is laughter. But I remembered them. Not faces, eyes. Later I wrote down not names, but details in a notebook, a dark jacket, a thick laugh, dark circles under the eyes, a voice with a hint of contempt. I returned different. Not stronger, no. My physical strength decreases with each passing year. But there is another force, the one I have been hiding, not for years, but for decades. It does not tear right away. It waits. It watches. It listens. When I crossed the threshold of my house, resentment no longer spoke in me. Resentment is the feeling of the living. And then I felt something different for the first time, a clarity bordering on ruthlessness. I dropped my bag on the table, the apples rolled, but I did not bend down to pick them up. I simply sat down. And the silence in the room was not empty for the first time in a long time. It seemed to be waiting for my word. I did not say it out loud, but I thought very clearly, enough. Not about pain. Not about old age. Not about the love of a lost family. But about the fact that I would no longer be a convenient ghost. It was not an explosion. Not a scream. Not tears. It was a click, like a light switch in the dark. Small, brief, but inevitable. I took my notebook. I flipped through the pages. And for the first time, I wrote down not just a date and an incident, but a short sentence, "I won't forget." And this time, I won't forgive. In the evening, I didn't turn on the light. I sat in the dark. I listened to the clock. Each tick reminded me, time is passing. But now it won't just be passing me by. The next day, I went to the attic. There, among the dust, lay boxes that I hadn't touched in over 20 years. In these boxes was what was left of my past. Contacts. Documents. Notes. Old phones. People I once spoke to and whom the world tried to erase along with me. And when I opened the first folder, I was no longer just an old man who had been pushed out into the street. I had become who I once was, only without regret. It wasn't the end. It was the opening of the season. It was the season opener. It was the season opener. The first evening I took out an old black notebook. It used to lie in the top drawer of my office desk, locked like a box of explosives. There was nothing criminal in it, only names, connections. Partners, colleagues, debtors, like-minded people, enemies. Everyone who mattered when I still knew how to trade not with money but with influence. I flipped through the pages slowly, like a priest reading old sins. And with each name I read, something became clearer in my head. Every person there was a tool. And even though decades had passed, I knew some of them were still alive. Some had become even more predatory. And some, like me, were in the shadows. But in the shadows, people speak more honestly. And I knew who to turn to. The first connection turned out to be easier than I expected. My former construction company analyst, PYLYP, now worked in financial monitoring. The call was short. "Hello, PYLYP. This is Merlyn. I need a little informational help. Not for publications. Just for my own use." Silence. Then a quiet laugh. "Merlyn. Are you still alive? How can I be of service?" I didn't want pain. I wanted an effect. My methods are not fists. They are information. Skillfully presented, aptly directed. And each subsequent day turned into a small chess game. I no longer collected regrets, I began to arrange the pieces. The first was Dimitro. I learned that his company had hidden tax loopholes that he covered up through acquaintances in the city council. I contacted an investigative journalist, anonymously gave him documents via VPN and TOR. A week later, a material appeared in the press with a hint of an internal investigation. Dimitri started running around, getting nervous, calling. But not me. He didn't call me anymore. And I wrote in my diary, 1, got my nerves back. Good. Alina, my daughter. She had an affair with a married colleague that lasted for years. A secret she was afraid to lose. I wrote to that man's wife from a fake account. Photos, correspondence. Nothing more, enough for a conflict to begin. In Alina's house, tantrums and tears appeared. For the first time, she couldn't control the situation. 2. Accidental honesty, the most painful. My grandson Oleg. Modern, cold, arrogant. He was preparing to enter a foreign university. I found out that he had cheated on his entrance essay. The text was stolen from an American base. An anonymous letter, and the application was cancelled. A showdown began at home. He shouted, blamed everyone. No one knew who did it. 3. Teach them to respect the beginning. Especially their own. I didn't expect thanks. I didn't want them to understand that it was me. Something else was more important to me. They all started to remember that things don't just happen. That the world is not a coincidence. That someone is still watching in the darkness. I arranged a chance meeting for Alina with one of her old friends, who knew how ashamed she was of me as a child. Word for word, and that friend threw out a line, "And you, I think, wanted to not recognize your father back then?" In the evening, my daughter called. Her voice was tense. "Dad, is everything okay?" I answered simply, "What shouldn't it be normal?" I stayed in the shadows. No direct threat, no curse. Just hints, mirrors, chains of events that forced them to look inside themselves. And see what they had been hiding for years. I saw Dmitri come into my house for the first time in 5 years. His face was tired. He brought documents, said he wanted to check some things from old contracts. He sat down in the same living room where he used to laugh when my hand shook. I looked at him silently, and for the first time he couldn't stand the silence. "Dad, are you hiding something from us?" I smiled. "I'm just finally not hiding anything. I didn't seek destruction. No. My revenge was more precise. I exposed the rot in them. I didn't impose it, I just highlighted it. Their fears, weaknesses, laziness, contempt, everything they had ignored for so long. And now they had to live. My house remained silent. But this silence became different. Not empty, but calm. I wasn't looking for retribution, I created a reminder. About myself. About the truth. About the fact that an old person is not the end, but a chapter worth rereading slowly. Because there are answers there. They don't applaud me. They don't thank me. I haven't become a hero in their stories. In their eyes, I'm still the same old man with a quiet voice and wrinkles instead of words. But now they're not laughing anymore. Because something has changed in the last few months. And it's not me, I've remained the same, silent, direct, precise. They've changed. Dimitro calls more often, even when he doesn't have to. He came in one day with a blanket, he said it was nothing, he just thought I might be cold. There was shame in his voice, not concern. But that's good too. Alina sat down at the table in the kitchen. She brought the dumplings that Lydia used to make. She said, "I don't know if they turned out as well as Mom's." I didn't say they turned out worse. I didn't say those dumplings smelled of childhood, and these ones smelled of remorse. I just ate. And she sat silently, looking out the window. For the first time, she was silent next to me, not running to the phone. My granddaughter Sophia texted me at night, "Grandpa, I'm sorry if I was rude. I just didn't know how to talk to you." I replied, "Silence is also an answer. But I've learned to understand it. I didn't make them kinder. I didn't convert them to religion, I didn't open their hearts to them. I only did one thing, I made them see themselves as they were. Without embellishment. And this truth, no matter how they avoided it, began to sharpen their hearts. And do you know what I understood? Revenge is not always about pain. Its highest form is a mirror. Cold, silent, truthful. They now live and know, they are evaluated not only by the world, not only by conscience. They are evaluated by the person they wanted to forget. But I didn't break anyone. I'm not the one who burns bridges. I'm the one who stands on the other shore and waits for someone to dare to cross alone. The town has changed a bit too. In the queue at the pharmacy, a young guy gave up his seat. I nodded, briefly, without gratitude. Because this should be the norm, not the exception. This time the doctor addressed me as Mr. Merlyn. Whether by chance or prompted from above, I saw in his eyes not arrogance, but wariness. And that's a step. I continue to keep a diary. But now other entries have appeared in it. Not only names and insults, but also observations. They learn. Slowly. Through losses, quarrels, doubts. But they change. And this is my victory. It is not loud. Not ostentatious. But deep. Now, when I sit in an armchair by the window in the evening, the silence is no longer suffocating. It listens to me. Respects me. I have learned not to forgive. But not to destroy either. People destroy themselves when they see themselves for who they are. My role is only to hold up a mirror. Because old age is not a shadow. This is memory. And strength. And if anyone thinks that years steal dignity, let them remember, dignity does not disappear. It simply waits for the moment when it is remembered. And when it is despised, it speaks. But not with words. I will not bring back my glory. I will not bring back Lydia. I will not bring back the years. But I have brought back respect. Not with a shout. not with a fist, but with silence, in which every word sounds like thunder. Now, when I look in the mirror, I do not see the old man. I see the same Merlyn, whom they were afraid to betray. And again in his eyes is fire. Cold. Even. The one that does not warm, but does not go out.
Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.